Welcome to Into the Void. I'm Brad Castleberry. As part of the Untitled Library podcast, these episodes are for us to go deep down the rabbit hole and discuss random and loosely library-related or library-adjacent topics. Today, Shane and I are going to discuss the Seinfeld character, Mr. Bookman.
Bookman? The library investigator's name is actually Bookman?
It's true.
That's amazing. That's like an ice cream man named Cone.
Mr. Bookman is remembered for having some great quotable lines.
Rock was never my bag, but you put on a pair of shoes when you walk into the New York Public Library, fella. You're a comedian. You make people laugh.
I try.
You think this is all a big joke, don't you? Maybe that's how you get your kicks. You and your good time buddies. Well, I got a flash for you, Joy Boy. Party time is over.
As great as those are, we have always felt that the character and the way the cast reacts to him and public libraries is worthy of some discussion. Before we get started, and even though you are all probably familiar, I'll refresh your memories. Mr. Bookman was a one-off character from Seinfeld Season 3, Episode 5, which was titled The Library. In this episode, Jerry is contacted by a stern library cop named Mr. Bookman, who informs him that he has an overdue library book, Tropic of Cancer, which he checked out in 1971. Now, 20 years overdue, Bookman wants justice and restitution. Initially, Jerry is resolute that he returned the book in 1971, but as the episode continues, we find that Jerry's memory is not as trustworthy as he would have us believe. After we are taken on a trip down memory lane with Jerry, George, and Sherry Becker, you slowly begin to realize that the mystery of what happened to the book may never be solved. As a result of not finding the book within the allotted one-week time frame that Mr. Bookman gave him, Jerry is forced to pay the library fine. It isn't until the final seconds of the episode that we find out Mr. Heyman, the gym teacher, had the book all along, perhaps as a memento from the wedgie incident that got him fired after George squealed.
Giddy up.
Okay, we're going to start with a little housekeeping business. First off, Shane and I both want to make it very well known that we are both huge Seinfeld fans.
Yes.
We've seen every episode. I can honestly speak for myself and say I've seen every episode at least 50 times. How about you?
I don't know if I've seen them that many times, but I've seen all of them multiple times, I think.
It's a show that I have on in the background.
Yes.
When I'm sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone, it's definitely the background noise of my living room.
And both of our brains are poisoned with Seinfeld and Seinfeld references.
Ever since Shane was first hired, I don't think we've gone a day without a Seinfeld reference in the archives. So I also want to warn listeners, even though this show was released in 1991, there will be spoilers. We're not going to protect anybody. We're just going to let it rip. And also, anybody who's only heard of Seinfeld but hasn't had the opportunity to watch it, you're in luck because the University Libraries has every single season available on DVD. So make sure you search the catalog and check it out for your weekend plans.
You can check things out from the library despite this episode that we're going to talk about. Because this, as we'll get into, This episode finds libraries frivolous or silly or unnecessary or unneeded.
Absolutely. And don't take us at our word. We want you to seek out the information and make your own decisions.
That's correct.
Let's jump right into set design. So when we're introduced to the library, Jerry and Kramer are the first ones to walk into the library. And what do we see?
There are several stereotypes about libraries in this episode that we'll talk about, but I think this is one of the first ones. And granted, it is 1991 or 1992 in the episode, but you could not imagine a more intentionally drab and uninviting entryway and lobby to this library. It doesn't look welcoming at all. It's all kind of dark colors and very uncomfortable looking furniture.
It's a very cramped space.
Yes, there's not a lot of room to browse or explore materials. I think there's one employee at
circulation desk. I would say.
Who is doesn't greet anyone. Is kind of ignoring everyone in the lobby area. Which we thought right away. We paused the DVD at this moment and said, this is a very antiquated idea of what a library is. Like if you walk into any library, public library, university library, it's going to look a lot more welcoming
Yeah,
than
you're going to
this
have windows,
library
you're going to
looks.
have natural light.
Yes.
It's going to be wide open.
Yep.
You're going to have talking on the floor,
Yes.
which is another thing. The one thing they are introduced to as soon as they walk in is somebody shushing them
Yes. For speaking at like a normal conversation volume.
right next to the circulation desk too,
Yes.
which is a location where you need to expect conversation. to be
Exactly.
held.
Yeah. So yeah, the shushing is another big stereotype. There's several. It's kind of like a running joke is that there's this one man reading a newspaper who continually, while they just continue to have a conversation, shushes them several times.
Mm-hmm.
The Dewey Decimal System. What a scam that was. Boy, this Dewey guy really cleaned up on that deal.
Where's George?
And I think that's another stereotype, obviously, of libraries, that they're silent spaces. And granted, there are, like in the old library here on campus, Albertson had quiet study floors where it was expected to be quiet, so students that wanted that quiet space could study. But like you said, in the lobby of Albertson or other libraries, it's expected there's going to be some conversation. Maybe there'll even be some video games being played.
Exactly.
Or
Exactly.
snacks being handed out for something like exam cram. And in this library, it's just, it needs to be silent.
Yes.
This man who's reading the newspaper needs to be focused. He cannot have his attention diverted in any way.
No. The next thing that they were confronted with, which you don't realize until George comes in afterward, is the homeless man sleeping on the front steps, which we find out later may or may not be former gym teacher.
Yes.
But the fact that they brought that into the episode, that public libraries are the preferred hangout of homeless people, I found very interesting.
In what way?
They definitely are fostering the stereotype
Oh, yeah, that's true.
that public libraries are kind of a haven for homeless people. Let's talk about the librarian.
Mm-hmm.
When we're first introduced to her, before even a word is spoken to her, Jerry and Kramer are talking off to the side, and they kind of introduce her to the audience as, I would say, emotionally scarred and a loner, kind of the old maid image that some of us have heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before we even met her.
Yeah.
So the way they put this out to the public it was kind of disparaging to me.
To step back from that for just a second, for those of our listeners who are tens of listeners who have not watched Seinfeld, this show is very dated in today's day and age in many ways. And this is just another example of the kind of misogynistic and sexist language that is just used without any sort of, just used openly and is not really interrogated in any way by the show. I think that's one way that it's very dated, and it's definitely present in this scene. Because when they're talking about her, there's kind of this weird, creepy aspect to the way, Kramer's speaking about her.
Yes.
That I found like very uncomfortable and very off-putting, as I think many people would.
Look at her. This is a lonely woman looking for companionship. A spinster. Maybe a virgin. Maybe she got hurt a long time ago. She's a schoolgirl. There was a boy. It didn't work out. So now she needs a little tenderness. She needs a little understanding. Needs a little Kramer, huh?
But as the episode moves forward, they actually portray that she is happier once she's in a relationship with Kramer.
Which is, another damaging piece of ideology that the show perpetuates.
Yeah.
Not to say those ideas are gone. Unfortunately, a lot of them are still with us, but they're less popular. But in looking back 30 years ago in this show, they're much more pervasive.
Yeah, and they're right in your face.
Yeah,
Like, there's no subtlety about it.
Throughout the entire episode.
Yes. So after the brief chat with the librarian, they learn that Mr. Bookman is not even in.
Yes.
He's out on a case.
Yep.
We had previously learned that the library cop is so busy lately because they've updated their records due to computerization, I believe, that now they're tracking down old scofflaws that have tried to get away with it. I want to talk about their attitude towards public libraries in general. Jerry's finally visited by Mr. Bookman in his apartment. Mr. Bookman tells him that he has a book that's been checked out for 20 years. It hasn't been returned. And Jerry replies with this is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you wasting my time?
Mm-hmm.
Is this even important? And I think that just goes to show how a large section of the population, unfortunately, looks at public libraries. They don't take them serious.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned Jerry's stand-up.
Yes. So in early seasons of Seinfeld, I believe this episode's from season 3, the show kind of intersperses in between scenes, just scenes of Jerry just doing stand-up. And it's usually a bit that's kind of tangentially related to the topic of the episode. And he has this bit about public libraries.
What's amazing to me about the library is now here's a place where you can go in, you take out any book you want, they just give it to you and say, bring it back when you're done. It reminds me of like this pathetic friend everybody had when they were a little kid that would let you borrow any of his stuff if you would just be his friend, you know? That's what the library is. It's a government-funded, pathetic friend. And that's why everybody kind of bullies the library. I'll bring it back on time, I'll bring it back late. Oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to charge me? Nickel?
Instead of looking at them as a vital public resource that provides access to all sorts of different information and resources free of charge to anyone.
To anyone, yes.
To anyone in the community, and are like vital, I don't know if lifeline's the right word, but in terms of the services that a lot of libraries provide, in terms of like helping people apply for jobs, helping people complete their taxes, helping people access the internet. They really are lifelines in a lot of ways, and libraries are not seen in that way at all in this episode. They're just seen as very silly and something that's unneeded or unnecessary, and just kind of a hassle.
Yes.
They're not seen as important as we both think they are, obviously.
And we talked before about they make an effort to punch down at the people that use libraries.
Yes.
For example, the shusher at the beginning of the episode who's reading the newspaper, he's not dressed in a suit. He's not dressed in a button-down. He's dressed in very drab clothing. Mm-hmm. They kind of make it a point that the public library is for those without means, and which is good. That's why the library is there. But I feel like they're making the argument that only lesser people would even go to a library.
Mm-hmm. There's that great line from Kramer early on where he kind of makes fun of people who go to the library to read the newspaper instead of just buying a copy.
Yes.
Where he says like, oh, they're just trying to save a quarter.
Right.
By reading the library's newspaper rather than going and buying their own.
Maybe they didn't have a quarter.
Exactly.
But yet they still want to be informed citizens.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Not only do they denigrate libraries, they also punch down, like you said, at the people who use them and the people who need them.
Yeah, even when you see Jerry and Kramer walk in there, they almost have kind of an air about them. Like they're better than everyone else.
Yep.
Like, I can't believe I'm stepping foot in this place.
Yep. And the way that Kramer like leans on the desk.
Yeah.
Like it's just like he owns the place immediately.
Yes.
He has no respect for anyone in there, anyone working there.
Let's talk briefly about how it took them 20 years to track down the book.
Oh,
so they
sure.
did mention that they've only been able to catch up because of computerization. But I think it says a lot about lack of funding and lack of employees at the libraries that they can't do their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I'm sure this was a problem in the 1990s, and it's still, a problem today with decades of austerity and cuts to public institutions and public budgets. That's not really a stereotype. It's probably like the one kernel of the show or the kernel of the episode that's actually quite true in a way. And I'm sure we should probably preface this whole episode with the fact that we're reading. I don't think Larry David set out to make a episode of Seinfeld that was trying to, be a psyop to get people to not like libraries.
No.
It's just fun to analyze. And I think that it does get that part right, where libraries are underfunded and understaffed. And the staff that do work there have to constantly find ways to do more with less. And I think that's illustrated really well, like you said, by the fact that it took them 20 years to even just not to like complete the process, to even just reach out to somebody about a book that was missing.
Right. And even the librarian is shown to be overworked, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah.
When they first show her, she's stamping books. She's carrying large piles of books.
There's no, that's the other thing. There's no cart to be seen anywhere in the library.
No. They just got to carry everything around.
They can't even afford a cart. They just have to carry these stacks of books around. That's a library, I believe, that's been dealing with some budget challenges.
Yeah,
I
and
think
we're
it's safe
supposed to
say.
believe that it's a main branch of the New York City Public Library.
Yeah.
So I
So-
don't know how accurate of a depiction we're working with here. So let's talk about Mr. Bookman himself.
Yes. He is, in many ways, I think, the best part of this episode. In terms of, like,
Absolutely.
entertainment value.
Yes. He's along the same lines. Like we mentioned earlier, he's a one-off character. Seinfeld, the show, is exceptionally good at one-off characters. The one that comes to mind is the Moyle. I think Bookman is
Oh.
right up there with him.
Yeah.
Like his level of energy and the way he steals the show. And the Mr. Bookman character is based on Joe Friday from Dragnet. Like I said, I've seen this episode many, many times, and we just rewatched it. And he is a cop / library employee from a different era, committed to his job.
Yes, very much so.
Even in his dialogue with Jerry about children having access to books, it's actually encouraging to hear his dialogue.
Maybe we can live without libraries, people like you and me. Maybe. Sure, we're too old to change the world. But what about that kid sitting down, opening a book right now in a branch of the local library and finding drawings of peepees and wee-wees and the cat in the hat and the 5 Chinese brothers? Doesn't he deserve better?
Yeah, you can hear in what he says that Bookman, kind of in opposition to all the other main characters in this episode, he really does care about libraries as a public service and providing resources to people that might not be able to afford them or might not have access to them otherwise. And he's very, the words that he says are very sincere, but I think this is one of the, even in this one scene where he's talking about how important libraries are as a public service, I think this is the most anti-library scene in the whole show, I would argue. Because of the way in which he delivers the line. He has that incredible, over-the-top Joe Friday delivery of all of his lines, especially in this scene in Jerry's apartment. And I think what that does, it's intentionally supposed to be silly and kind of not to be taken seriously. And I think him saying those very sincere things about libraries and how important they are while performing the lines in this kind of silly way is meant to kind of show that, oh, the sincere things that he's saying aren't sincere. They're not to be taken seriously. They're just kind of silly. And I think that really reinforces the main point that we're finding in this episode, at least, that libraries are kind of outdated and ridiculous and kind of silly and not necessary. So I think that's a really dangerous piece of ideology that the episode kind of slips in there.
Okay, so to round this out, we don't want to leave our audience thinking that this episode is filled with flaws and therefore a black eye on the Seinfeld canon.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this episode.
Yes.
It's hilarious. Like I said, the Bookman character himself is a show stealer. He has some of the best lines and the best delivery of any character on Seinfeld.
And we should give the actor who plays Bookman, Philip Baker Hall, plays Lieutenant Bookman in this episode. Just an amazing performance.
So Mr. Hall did pass away about 2 years ago. I saw him crop up in a couple shows that I've watched recently, including Modern Family. He played Next Door Neighbor, and also Curb Your Enthusiasm. He played a doctor. So he did. He worked with Larry David again for many years. I also love the obvious and over-the-top stereotypes.
Yes.
Because they are presented as cartoonish. You have the shushing, which we mentioned, which in real life probably not going to happen.
Yeah, even back in the day when libraries were, I suppose, like more that way, like nobody would shush anyone the way that this guy was shushing.
Right.
Jerry and Kramer.
And they really leaned into the old maid persona of the librarian.
Yeah.
The detective persona is over the top.
Yep. That's part of what makes it so entertaining. Yeah. This audio format doesn't really do it justice. You'll hear some clips of Lieutenant Bookman, but his mannerisms and how he moves and how he points his finger at Jerry are just so funny and so over the top.
Yes.
And so well done.
And I do feel in a very small way that the group gets more comfortable with the library by the end of the episode.
Yes.
Because I noticed all of them were there when Jerry paid his fine.
Yep.
Right? And Elaine is sitting there reading one of the very newspapers that's on the wooden pole that they were making fun of originally. Kramer has since been emotionally taken away by poetry that the librarian had written, so he's interested in writings. Jerry, I don't think, has any real positive inclinations towards libraries by the end.
No. But that very much fits with his character throughout the show, is that he's always, all the four characters, and this is one of the reasons I like the show so much, as like a satire of kind of the narcissistic and self-centered and the superficial world that existed in the 90s and still exists today in many ways. He's always the most superficial, at least in my opinion. He's the most superficial and the least compassionate of all the characters in the show.
Yes.
For sure, throughout.
And you don't always pick up on that because he's the most reserved character. George, it's obvious that he doesn't care about anybody else except his own immediate needs and wants. The episode's also filled with a lot of great one-liners.
Yeah, there was one that I had completely forgotten, because I haven't seen this episode in a while, about Christopher Columbus, that we had to pause what we were watching, because I just broke down laughing when Jerry calls Columbus Eurotrash.
Yes.
I had completely forgotten that line, and it's just so
I feel like
funny.
it's even more funny since we've moved away from celebrating Columbus.
Yeah, and we've rightfully come to seeing him as a colonizer from Europe,
an invader.
An invader rather than an explorer. I think it's even more funny now, just like you said. I think that's part of what drove my reaction to it. Yeah. But I was just surprised because I can't remember that line from previous times that I watched this episode.
This is why we have to revisit old sitcoms. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our cursory analysis of the episode The Library. If you have questions or comments, be sure to send them our way. And please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and remember, the library is always open for discovery.